Hello and welcome to Your Property Podcast. My name is Michelle Cairns from YPN, and today we have got Kirsty Darkins with us. Hi Kirsty, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Nice to be here.
Yes, nice to see you as well. I've got your Christmas jumper on.
I have, yeah. I'm getting all in the festive spirit, you know.
Great, amazing. Well, we are recording this 19th of December, so we're just got this in just before the Christmas season starts. So
Yeah.
Let's crack on. For those of you who don't know Kirsty and have not come across her before, she's currently a chartered surveyor, but in her previous career worked with prominent firms such as Boots, CBRE and Hammerson. With over 20 years of experience in managing substantial property portfolios, she transitioned into property investing in 2016. Since then, she's worked in property consultancy, including launching Progressive Property Network in Birmingham. Her current focus centres on commercial property consultancy, it's a bit of a mouthful, collaborating with investment partners and building a passive rental income stream for her financial freedom. So, commercial is the theme today, and I saw you speak a few months ago at the Refurb Ed in Manchester, which is a very good, very well attended meeting. So you were on stage talking about the opportunities with commercial, and we haven't done a podcast on commercial for a while, so I thought we'd get you in and talk about what's new. So I'm going to just jump in with a question because for a lot of people, commercial property is very attractive for lots of reasons we can talk about. However, for people who have looked at it for a while, perhaps let's say in the last 12 months or so, it's been harder to stack those deals. So do you think it's still harder to stack, or is it just, people aren't finding the right deals?
Sometimes I think it's because people don't know where to look for deals. They are there. People often just look in the wrong place because it's very different to sourcing residential property in terms of where those best opportunities lie. So yeah, the deals are there. I think a lot of the time it's a bit of a knowledge gap. It can be a relationship gap because it's all very relationship driven with the commercial agents finding the best deals. And that's really my experience, is that people who have a lot of experience in residential and then either want they've transferred their pension to a SIPP or a SAS and they want to use those funds, or they just want to diversify their portfolio and be a bit less hands-on. And then they go, oh, actually, there aren't any deals because I can't find them. But it's because they're not always looking in the right places.
Okay, great. Where's the wrong place and where's the right place then?
Great question. So the wrong place is on portals like Rightmove Commercial and EGI Property Link and any of the places that you would often look for residential deals. And that's because commercial agents are quite lazy, quite introspective. It's quite a small, close-knit industry. So they put all their opportunities on their own websites. But then, of course, you need to know who they are and how to find them to find those websites. So you don't want to be looking on the big portals, but what you can use the big portals to do is to find agents rather than properties. So that's my tip for where to start with commercial if you've never looked for commercial opportunities before. So you want to put your search into Rightmove Commercial, say Birmingham, where I am, 15-mile radius, because we go quite broad in terms of patch in commercial, and then put your price bracket in and have a look at who seems to be most active. And that's one of the best ways to start finding commercial agents you can connect with.
How do you know how active they are?
You can just tell by the number of listings, listings they've got. Also, you can look at what they've got on the market to rent. But it's really just a starting point for finding commercial agents. And the other way is simply to Google commercial property agent wherever your location is. And then go through to about page 3 or 4, because a lot of commercial agents really aren't bothered about SEO and flashy websites. And so some of the best agents that we work with now are the very small agents who don't do a lot of marketing and advertising because they don't need to. They've got their investors, they work closely with them. And if you want to get into that stable, then you've got to put a bit of work in to introduce yourself and build that relationship.
Okay. So don't just go straight to individual portals because
No.
you'd just be searching through there. Have you used Property Filter at all?
Yeah, I have. I use Nimbus mostly though. I find Nimbus is best for commercial,
Right.
if I'm honest, probably because it was set up by two commercial surveyors. So,
Yeah.
they kind of understand the commercial side. But yeah, I do. I use like Property Filter and Nimbus more for due diligence than actually finding properties,
Yeah.
if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's just I was curious because a lot of our members have got Property Filter, and I suppose that's sort of reverse engineered. So rather than going to the individual portals, actually it presents you with certain
Mm,
deals. So I was just wondering if that was a different way around of going around that. So okay, so finding agents then is the most important thing
yeah.
to do first. And then how does one build a relationship with agents if you've never done commercial before? And everyone's got to start somewhere, right? So
Yeah.
if they've only been in residential, let's say they've got a couple of single lets or HMOs and they want to get their first residential property, what does that conversation look like when you approach a new agent?
Yeah, to get their first commercial property. Well, actually, I was having a conversation with a commercial agent about this yesterday. So I know, but it's always useful to hear it from them direct. And these were his exact words. So he has been a commercial agent for 20 years. He runs his own commercial agency in Birmingham. And I asked him that question because it's what I get asked the most from my clients. And he said, what I want, Kirsty, is someone with a plan. So you need to know what you want. What are you looking for? But not just some broad, oh, I think I want to buy an industrial property, or I think what size, where, what are you going to do with it? Do you want to be able to add value to it? How are you funding it? What return do you want? You need to have that bit more detail. So his words were, I want to work with people with a plan and who can perform. So you must have your funding in place. And for commercial property, most of the time, that means you need cash on the way in, cash to purchase needs to be your funding strategy if you want to add value. So he wants to know that you can perform because there's a lot of people that provide proof of funds and then still don't seem to be able to perform when it comes to completing the purchase. And there's nothing that annoys an agent more than that because it makes them look like they haven't done their due diligence on the buyer. So have a plan and be able to perform.
Would you say somebody could look at a deal that's on the market and say, do an example plan and say, okay, this is the type of thing I'm looking at. It would work at this purchase price. Oh, and by the way, I've spoken to the lender, and if I were to get it at this price, then they would, provide the funding.
Yeah,
Is that something you could do?
that's exactly what a commercial agent is looking for. What they're not looking for is and he actually gave me an example yesterday as well. So this is all very fresh. I was like, this is good. And he said, well, someone called me last week and just said, I want to book a viewing on that industrial property that you've got for sale. It's a big chunk of industrial space. It was about 10,000 square feet. And, so the agent asked the question, said, well, what will you be looking to do with it? Well, I don't know yet. I just want to go and have a look at it. And that's the kind of person
A red flag.
that
Yeah.
they don't want to deal with. Because he's like, why am I going to spend my time viewing a property with someone who has no idea what they want?
So it just
He's like,
gave away.
I'm,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's a good example of what they're not looking for. So really, commercial agents are professionals and they want you as an investor to behave as a professional. So they want you to treat it as you should as an investment, but they want you to be ready. They want you to have a plan and they want you to be ready to perform. And if you are those two things, they are more than happy to engage with you, give you information, give you their time. You just do need to be ready.
Yeah. So in that scenario, then let's say that was person A, who's the novice and not
Yeah.
really, it kind of gave them away that they weren't prepared and they didn't really know what they were doing. So person B comes along and they've got a plan. So they've looked at the property in advance. Perhaps they've done their due diligence on various portals, software, and they can say, okay, these are the possible exits for it. So they don't have to have gone out and and got planning in place or
No,
anything like
no.
that. They don't have to have started anything, but actually going to the agent with, here are all the different exits that I think this will work for, and here's my funding in place. Here is my, spreadsheet of, just to kind of come across as professional. So is there anything else that, a professional investor could do to impress an agent to make sure that first conversation
I
goes as
think
well as possible?
really, it's just to be genuinely interested in the agent and building a relationship, and say that from the outset. So tell them what your overall plan is for investing, so let them know that you've got some experience. So I'm an experienced residential investor, I've got buy-to-lets, I've got HMOs, I've got whatever it is that you've got. Now I want to diversify into commercial, so I need to connect with agents like you, build relationships, because I want to build a commercial portfolio. If you start with that, then they know exactly where you've come from, what you're doing. You're not just a total newbie to property, because that, in commercial, that doesn't tend to go down well with agents. They're kind of like, if you've never, it's quite a sophisticated market, and they just prefer to work with experienced property investors. So if you've got some experience, tell them what it is, and also tell them that I'm just looking for one property for my portfolio, or I'm looking to buy a property for my own business to occupy, or I'm looking to build a portfolio. And what agents also want to know, they want to build a relationship because they want repeat business from you. So in commercial, we need agents for three things mainly. We need them to find properties, because a lot of the time they're not well advertised and they come through those relationships, or they come back to market and then the agents just pick up the phone to the people that they know can transact. We need them to do due diligence, because unlike in residential, access to property data such as market rents, sales comparables isn't openly available. It's not there. It's not on a portal anywhere. You can't find it. You've got to phone the agents to get that intelligence. And then thirdly, we need them once we've bought the property and we've done something to it to add value. So we've either split it up into smaller units, or we've got vacant space that we want to let. We need the agents to help us find the tenants. So the agents want to work with you, because they know that if you buy a property from them, you're highly likely to go back to them and say, oh, well, now I've bought this property and I've done my work to it, can you help me let it? And they'll get the business out of you at the end as well. So that, I think sometimes people think commercial agents don't want to work with us, and it's the opposite. They want your business. They just need you to tell them who you are, have a plan, and be able to perform.
Yeah, there's tends to be, certainly when I have spoken to commercial agents in the past, I was probably that novice beginner calling up saying, have you got any properties I can add value to? Many of us have been there. I'll hold my hands up. But you don't know what you don't know, right? So everyone's got to start somewhere. So, by all means, start in an area perhaps that if you're having these conversations for the first time, maybe people can start in a different area where they're not, if they don't get it right the first time, then they're not kind of damaging that relationship. But there is a bit more of a barrier, as we've talked about there, because they have higher expectations of us as investors. And, it's not like a residential agent that is working with just the general public who are just first time, or, home buyers. So there's a different level of relationship there that's needed. What else in terms, obviously, you've done a lot of consultancy and you've got mentees and that kind of thing. Is there anything else that people miss in those first stages? Anything that kind of shows red flags of, this person isn't ready, or?
Not really. I think that what most people miss is following up. It's a bit like networking. It's all in the follow-up, isn't it? We all go out networking and we spend our time, often time when we'd like to be relaxing, but we think this is what we need to do to get where we want to go. So we go out in the evenings and we network, and then we don't follow up because we get busy. And that's the thing that makes a difference with agents as well, is if you've been out on viewings with agents, and even if that property doesn't work for you, take the time to feed that back and feedback why it doesn't work for you, and thank them for their time. It's simple, right? But you imagine being an agent. I think one of the hardest parts of being an agent is that it's a thankless task a lot of the time, because we all want what we want when we want it. And then we leave them in the dark. We don't follow up. We don't give them any insight into why we're not going to make an offer on that property. So what I teach my mentees is always follow up and be consistent with that. So thank them for their time. And then all the properties that you viewed, tell them whether you are going to offer or not, subject to full due diligence. And if not, why not? And then it helps them to work out what you are actually looking for as well. So it's kind of it's a process together. But I think just being respectful of their time, following up, will make you stand out from the crowd, because a lot of people don't take the time to do that. And also, if you are, just treat them as a person, build that relationship. They want to go out for coffee and talk to you about commercial. They hate being sat in the office, believe me. I don't like being sat in the office.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think it's so true. It's so easy to stand out because nobody else is doing this follow-up, and just by that, simple thing, have that, email ready to go before you even do the viewing. So once the viewing's done, you can press go on it. Yes, it is for you, or no, it isn't for you. And just, I suppose what you're saying is think long term.
Yeah, I am. Think of it as a relationship from the very first time that you contact them. And I asked, again, I asked the agent I was talking to yesterday, I said, what's important to you? What makes you want to work with an investor? And he said, it's about relationship, Kirsty. He said, I'm interested in having a relationship. I'm not interested in a one-off transaction or just being useful for 10 minutes. He said, I'm interested in people that want to build a relationship, because this is a people business, and that's from the mouth of an agent. So that's what they want. And being consistent. Consistency is the other thing that most people miss, and that I help people with. And that goes across all investing. I think we can be easily inconsistent and then wonder why we're not getting the results. And it is about having in your diary to call each of the agents that you're building a relationship once every 2 to 3 weeks. Oh, just calling to check in, see what's happening, anything new coming in, anything that's about to fall through that I could help you with, or and how are you anyway, and just keeping that regular conversation going, because agents are busy, and so they're not immediately always going to think, if you're quite new to them, oh, I should send that to that person. And I can't tell you, I've got relationships that are decades old and they still don't send them to me.
Oh, yeah.
And then I phone them and go, what have you got? And they go, oh yeah, hang on, I need to send you this, this, and this. And they send me about 4 things, and I'll be going. So a bit of it's about having a system and a process for being consistent and showing up in that relationship, because the agents are not going to do that for you.
A very simple CRM pipeline just to keep track, because we all know what it's like. You go on these viewings and you speak to people and you're like, oh, what did that person say? What was their name?
Yeah.
And it's so easy for them all to just blur into, just into each other, and it's hard to separate. So yeah, being organized, having some system in place, whatever that is. And yeah, just having the relationship. I just want to talk about that, because for people starting out, okay, they want to get to know some of the agents. First of all, is there any type of agent in that office that they should approach first? Is it the valuer, or is it I don't know if it's any different than just the residential side, where you've got the desks and they all sit in different places depending on their roles in the business. So first of all, who is it? And then how many people, how many different agents should people get to know and work with? Because there's so many. How many should they start with?
Yeah, good question. So yes, you want the commercial agents, you don't want the valuer. They just call themselves commercial agents. So they might specialize in a specific sector of commercial, like retail or office or industrial, if they're in a bigger agency. The smaller agencies, they tend to go across the market. So they'll be across industrial, high street and office. And then how many? So I advise a minimum of 5, but 10 is better. So if you're starting out, because commercial, there's not as much commercial property as there is residential. So about 13% of all UK property, investable property, is commercial. So that's not a high percentage, is it? When,
Oh,
and so you've got to work harder to find the commercial opportunities a lot of the time. However, having said that, there is a lot less competition. So it does, it's fine that there are fewer opportunities because there are fewer investors for those opportunities. But you need about 5 agent relationships to get started across quite a broad patch. So as I say, you want to go 10, 15-mile radius of your ideal investment patch in commercial, because it's a lot less hands-off to manage. So you don't need to be there and be on top of it. And you can add value without doing physical development work as well, which means you definitely don't need to be there. You just need the local agents to help you to do that. So about five relationships.
okay. And you mentioned there about adding value in the current market. What do you think the best ways are to add value to a commercial property?
In the current market, I think asset management, so paper exercises, which is working with tenancies and leases to add values. That might be renewing a lease onto a longer term. It might be a rent review that's outstanding where the rent can be uplifted. It might be letting vacant space. It might be splitting vacant space to right size it for current demands in the market. It might be removing tenant breaks. But I personally don't want to be in long-term, capital-intensive, time-intensive development projects in the current market, because I think there's too much uncertainty and it's very difficult to forecast. So unless you're happy to stay in your investments for 2-3 years potentially, I don't want to be doing big commercial developments at the moment or conversions. I want to be buying commercial property to keep commercial and adding value through the paper exercise angle, which again is a different way of adding value that's not available in residential. So it's something to learn, but there's again far fewer people who know how to do it. Therefore, you're finding yourself a niche.
Yeah. And is your preference to take on a property that's already tenanted then?
Yes. So my preference is to get my capital working from day one, to have a return from day one and have some income. It doesn't have to be fully let, it could be part let, but it's very helpful to have cash flow in the market that we find ourselves in now, from the day that you invest in a property. So that's what we spend most of our time investing in ourselves, sourcing for our clients and helping our mentees find. Unless they particularly want to do development, there are opportunities to do development right now. It's just not my strategy for the next probably 2 years, and not where I suggest people start.
Yeah. So when you say before about about staying in the property for 2 years, what you mean is at perhaps bridging rates, or
Yeah.
because if people go into a development project, then they're either full cash buyers or they're working with bridging finance,
Bridging.
which is a much
Yeah.
higher rate. And then who knows what's going to happen in 9, 12, 18
Yeah.
months. So because of the uncertainty, actually, it's better to. So would you get a mortgage on the property straight away then?
Not if you're buying it to add value, because all the value in
Yeah,
commercial property is in the security of the income
yeah,
stream. So you're buying properties at a time where the income stream is not secure because the leases are short, or perhaps you've got some vacant space or a tenant is failing, and then you're sorting out those issues to add the value. So you could exit with refinance, but you really need to be cash on the way in to find the best opportunities and the most profitable investments in commercial.
right. Okay, so this is a variation of sort of a parallel variation of planning game for some people,
Yeah, I
or
guess so. Yeah, yeah, similar to planning
sorry,
game,
what did you call
so
it?
asset management or paper
Asset management.
exercises
Yeah.
makes more sense to people because that's effectively what it
Okay.
is. And you can do it remotely as well. That's the good thing about it. So it means you can have a broader patch in terms of where you go to find the opportunities, because all you need to execute paper exercise adding value is the local agent relationships. So they can find new tenants for you, they can do lease renewals for you, they can do rent reviews for you. You don't even need to be there.
That sounds great. Any what are the kind of top risks involved then? Because I suppose if for a lot of people going into commercial, the biggest risk sometimes is that it's vacant and they can't get another tenant in. So, but if you're, buying properties that are already tenanted, you're obviously removing that risk from day one. So, how do you assess how much value can be added?
Yeah, so how you assess how much value can be added is you have to learn how how commercial valuation works ultimately. So you have to understand that a 1-year lease is a lot less valuable than a 5-year lease, for example, and you also have to understand the value of a tenant as a business. So Greggs, for example, who is now, I've got a Greggs in one of my properties as of this year. I'm kind of going, okay, it's the first brand I've invested in. But if you've got Greggs or a PLC, they're much more valuable in terms of adding to capital value than a sole trader startup business as well. So you've got to understand what it is that adds value and detracts value from commercial property, because there is no bricks and mortar value. So it's fundamental to start to educate yourself on how commercial valuation works, and then you'll understand how to work out where the angles are for adding value through asset management.
Could you give us an example? So Greggs, for example, typically, I don't know if there is a typically, but typically what would you expect? How long would a lease be on a company like Greggs?
So they often take 10-year leases with a break at 5 or 5-year straight leases now. So that's generally what they'll take. And you should be able to get a straight 5-year lease out of a new business or a small limited company as well. The difference is that to value a commercial property, you take the rental income and you capitalise it with an investment yield. And the investment yield is determined by how long the lease is and who the tenant is, mainly. Few other variables, but that's the main thing. So let's take the same length lease, 5 years to Greggs and 5 years to a sole trader. 5 years to Greggs would be 6% investment yield. And because it's a multiplier, the lower that investment yield, the higher the capital value. Whereas 5 years to a sole trader would be 10%. So we've got a 4% difference in the multiplier, which makes a huge difference in the end capital value. So if I do it, I'll pick a rent out of the air. So let's say 25,000 a year. So if we do that at 6%, and the capital value is 416,000. Whereas if we do that at 10%, the capital value is 250,000. And that's the difference a tenant can make to commercial property value.
That's amazing. Thank you for doing that calculation for me. There was no way I was going to do that in my head.
No, me either.
No, it's really interesting to be able to compare actually two different types of tenants in an example like that. Makes it really difficult to understand. So, great. Okay. Obviously, you've got your spreadsheets and all sorts of due diligence that you teach. Where do you see that? So, okay, 2 years before you kind of see, okay, let's see what happens then. What about a bit further? Let's say the next 5 years. How do you see? I know we haven't got a crystal ball, but any ideas where?
No, well, let's start with where we are now, and then I can kind of build up to 5 years. And it is difficult to forecast that far, to be honest, because if we look back 3 years, this time 3 years ago, none of us were or 4 years ago, so 2019, December 2019, none of us knew COVID was coming. None of us expected any of what happened to happen, and then none of us expected Liz Truss and Kwasi to come in just over 12 months ago and blow up the economy, and for interest rates to go where they are and inflation to be so high. So I think it is difficult to forecast because anything could happen. We're likely to have a change of government. Who knows what the impact of that is going to be? But I think right now where we are in the commercial market is we are at the bottom of the market, which is an exciting place to be if you've got access to cash and some knowledge and you're ready to take advantage of the opportunities. So we are at the bottom of the market. It's going to be a buyer's market for at least the next 12 months, probably going into 2025 as well. So capital values have dropped between 20 and 30% from where they were at their peak in 2022. Mostly industrial that's dropped the furthest because that market got too heated during COVID. The office sector is ever evolving and quite difficult to forecast. And high streets have settled down in terms of where the rents are going to go in most high streets, but there are still a lot of high streets that are thriving and a lot of high streets that totally need repurposing, and you need to know the difference between the two. So that's where we are right now. Values are likely to start climbing again towards the end of next year. So I think where we'll be in 5 years' time is, well, I always look backwards to look forwards. So if you look at the most comparable time recently to now is 2009. So if we look what happened 5 years on from 2009, that's where we're likely to be in the commercial market 5 years from now. And what happened is, so where will that be? 2014. So the market was really on its way back up. It was really climbing. Rents were climbing, capital values were climbing, because we hit the top of the market somewhere between 16 and 17. So I think we will be midway to values climbing again. Rents will be climbing. I think industrial will still be a very secure investment. I think there'll still be a lack of supply for industrial property, which means rents are going to keep increasing. I think also what might have happened, however, as we're seeing now, is that build costs are starting to come down largely because the big house builders have stopped a lot of their developments. There's a lot more availability of labour. So development is becoming more viable. So I think in 5 years' time, we'll probably be seeing a development boom in commercial, which again is exactly what happened after the 2008-9 downturn. I mean, that was a proper crash. I don't think there's going to be a proper crash this time. But that's where I think we'll be, is I think values will be climbing, rents will be climbing, development will be back on its feet. I think there'll be a lot of industrial development. Offices, I think we will have bottomed out the office market. So I think unless you provide the right space in the right location with the right facilities, and energy efficiency is ever more important to tenants as well, a lot more office properties are going to be converted because they're just defunct in terms of what works now. But we'll have bottomed out what office space is actually needed in 5 years' time, because I think we'll have decided, right, this is how we're working forever. At the moment, we've still got a bit of backwards and forwards going on. Businesses not quite deciding how they want to work, hybrid, in the office, out of the office. And I think the office market will have matured into its new forever way of being. And then I think high streets, a lot more high streets will have had a lot more investment. And I think it'll be very obvious in 5 years' time which high streets need to go and be totally repurposed, and which high streets are long-term sustainable. So I think there'll be a lot of change in the next 5 years, but it's quite an exciting time to be in the market.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we could sit here and talk all day about
I know.
high streets and all that kind of thing. I'm down, but conscious of time. So, okay, do you want just that's really interesting, by the way, very just articulately put. And I think for a lot of people, they're a bit nervous about predicting or saying where things might go. So it's great to hear the theory behind your thoughts as well. So thank you for that.
Well, I think, it is a prediction at the end of the day. And as we said, I don't have a crystal ball. So I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen, but if not too many surprises happen, that's what I think will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have to come back in 5 years and see where we are.
Yeah, I know. I'll be like, well, I got that wrong.
Okay, well, obviously you do your own consultancy and have mentees, etc. So where can people find out about you and what you're up to next?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're on all the socials. So we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Also, you can just go to our website, kdcommercial.co.uk, and everything we can help you with is on there.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely fascinating and really lots of value here, lots of golden nuggets for people.
Good.
So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me, Michelle.
You're welcome. All right. For anyone else who's not yet a subscriber to the YPM magazine, click the link in the show notes for your free 30-day trial, and we will see you next time.